guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another episode of my Shock to the Past series. For those of you who are new to my channel, Shock to the Past is a series consisting of films from the 60s, 70s and 80s and how they shocked audiences back then and how they live up by today's standards. So today we're going to be looking at a horror classic. A lot of people consider this as the king of zombie films. It was an Italian movie dubbed in English, released in the year 1979, and this is a movie by Lucio Fulci and it's called Zombie. So it's also known as Zombie 2 and Zombie Flesh Eaters. So if you can't find it under one title, please look for it under the other. So for this discussion, it's going to be known as the title it is when it was released here in Australia. So Lucio Fulci is a household name as far as horror is concerned. A lot of people love this guy, and I'm not really familiar with this director as much. You know, when it comes to classic horror, I'm a little bit behind. But when you think of classic zombie films, you think of George A. Romero. He was the founder of the zombie subgenre. He really breathed life into it. So I can really appreciate that. Although I think that director was overrated, I'm not really into his work as much as a lot of other people are. I still appreciate what he did for the horror genre. So Night of the Living Dead was the only film of his that I liked. And so for that reason, I was coming into this film a little bit skeptical. Is that old-fashioned sort of zombie films, was it going to be anything like George A. Romero, or was it going to be something completely different? So this is a movie that takes place on a Caribbean island. There is a disease that breaks out that causes the dead to come back and basically create chaos. And so to the horror of the main characters, they realise that this disease has the capability of actually leaving this island and getting to New York City. And if it does, then all hell is going to break loose, and it's basically the end of days. And so the characters involved in this movie are trying to fight off the undead and also come up with a cure. So whether or not they can is ultimately up for you to find out for yourself. So as I said, Lucio Fulci was a name that I'd obviously heard about. You know, who hasn't heard of Lucio Fulci? If you're a horror fan, then Lucio Fulci is one of those household names. But he is known as the king of gore, the king of Italian horror. And Italian horror, once again, I don't really gravitate to, is that a lot of these, you know, Dario Argento, again, another director who I feel is a little bit overrated. I know that's a very unpopular opinion, but you guys know that I'm very, very honest in my reviews and discussions. And so Dario Argento, you know, Suspiria, all those kinds of films, you know, they're giallo films. Now, when it comes to Italian horror, I associate Italian horror with giallo, but then you've got different directors such as Lucio Fulci who specialise in gore. And I like gore, but there have been a lot of films, again, from the past, from Italy, with gore, that I haven't really liked. And so I didn't really know exactly what I was going to get into with Zombie, but the reason why I wanted to see it is that I thought it was a necessary addition to my Shock to the Past, and yeah, it's basically essential to have an episode featuring a Lucio Fulci film. Otherwise, you know, this would have no credibility. And so I went into it not really expecting to like it, and I will say that I actually thought I really enjoyed this movie, and it has the true essence of a true zombie film. But it also has the case for the fast-running infected zombies. Now, I know a lot of people, when it comes to zombie films, a lot of people like the traditional zombie, which is basically in this film where they're walking. But this movie and the movies of George A. Romero, it shows why the fast-running zombie is better, in my opinion. Now, there are moments in this movie, there are moments in George A. Romero's film where you have to have a suspension of disbelief. Now, obviously, the suspension of disbelief in a horror film and a zombie movie, but there are moments in this movie and there were moments in George A. Romero films where it was a little bit silly. And I thought, all right, well, it had to be like that, otherwise it wouldn't have been scary. You know, the gore, if these characters reacted in a certain way, then they would have avoided the death, their imminent death, and therefore you wouldn't see gore. And so you have to have a little bit of an allowance to consider the fact that this is a gore film and they have to make stupid decisions. And I was constantly, you know, thinking to myself, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? You could have easily avoided being eaten, but obviously people go into these films to watch gore, and you can't have gore if you don't have death. And so you have to make those allowances. But with the fast-running zombies, it eliminates all those silly moments. And so I definitely think there's a case for the fast-running zombie. But I know there are traditionalists, I know there are fans of the slow-run walking zombie. So that was something that I could, you know, I appreciate again. But in this movie, you have to make allowances. You have to have that suspension of disbelief. You have to have that sense that, all right, it is a gore film and I'm just going to revel in the gore. So there are silly moments to this movie, but what I loved, absolutely loved about Zombie was the gore. The gore was was absolutely phenomenal. Even by today's standards, it is shocking, it is disgusting. And I absolutely loved the zombie makeup. The zombie makeup in this movie is the best that I have ever seen. They were disgusting. They actually seemed like they were up from the dead. They were up from the graves. You got maggots crawling through, and they're just absolutely repulsive. And that's exactly what I believe a zombie should look like. And so you have absolutely phenomenal makeup. You got phenomenal gore, and that's what you go in for. And that's exactly what you get from Lucio Fulci. You've got a story that is very, very basic. There's no underlying sort of symbolic meaning with George A. Romero films. It's basically a film that you can just enjoy and go in there for the gore. You don't go in there for character development. You don't go in there for caring about people. You don't go in there caring about the story. It's a simplistic story, and it's just going by the numbers as far as that's concerned, but it knows what it is. It knows it's a gore film, and it's going to exceed in what it's promising, and it definitely does that. And I will say that this is probably one of my favourite, if not favourite, older zombie movie. I thought this is absolutely fantastic. Although it is silly, there are moments in the film that I thought it would have been a lot better if it didn't exist, but I will basically excuse a lot of the shortcomings of this film because it is a classic film. It is classic zombie, and the gore, as I said, was absolutely phenomenal, and the makeup effects from the zombies was second to none, and it has a genuinely creepy atmosphere. The tone to the film is dreaded, the soundtrack is dreaded, the soundtrack is very classic, and Lucio Fulci, so not only does he know how to make great gore and great makeup effects, but he knows how to create a really creepy atmosphere, a very tense atmosphere, and also a very fun atmosphere at the same time. So there's plenty of gore in this movie. As I said, it is very silly, and it does make a case for the faster running zombies, but if you are into classic horror, then Lucio Fulci's Zombie, I believe, is better than George A. Romero films. The only George A. Romero movie I liked was Night of the Living Dead, but this movie I thought, alright, there are silly moments, but it does have a very strong classical feeling to it, and so it's basically essential viewing for anyone who is a zombie movie fan. Alright guys, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Till next episode, keep watching horror, and I'll see you later.